Hey everyone, I'm LeystTV, and today I'm joined with Terran Gregory. Thank you so much for being here today. If
Um,
somebody doesn't know who you are, could you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
yeah, I'm Terran Gregory. I'm cinematic narrative director on World of Warcraft, where I've been working on a whole slew of World of Warcraft cinematics, stories, trailers for almost 17 years.
Yeah, I've been following a lot of the work you've done over the years. You've been working on stuff before you joined the company. Maybe you know what I'm thinking about, but you actually
Right.
co-created the Return Machinima back in 2000. And if
hmm
somebody hasn't seen it, the Machinima, I would highly suggest you to go watch it because it's a classic. I
hmm
believe that's the video that actually got you the job at Blizzard, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, definitely started the journey,
Yeah,
right? Like we made a contest entry for BlizzCon and then ended up meeting a bunch of people there, talking about a bunch of things. And then over the course of the next few months, opportunities came up and I got hired as a video editor.
Oh. Compared to then, the machinima landscape has changed quite a bit, I would say. Is there
hmm
something you would tell people who want to get into creating machinima videos today?
Oh, it's wildly different. I mean, the technology in 2005 versus the technology today, in so many respects, whether it's, the composite software, the 3D software, the entire, software culture around Blender,
Hmm.
readily accessible 3D tools. It's so empowering for anyone who wants to get into that stuff. And also YouTube. We live in an era by which there are literally thousands of hours of tutorials of almost anything you want to learn how to do
Yeah.
online. And so really it's just a matter of, do you want to do it? Find the people who are doing it, who watch the resources and dive right in, because there is still to this day amazing work being done by machinima or machinima adjacent creators like Hurricane or others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Hurricane is beyond. He's really, really talented. It's crazy to think about. Yeah, you answered my next question actually, so I'm just gonna jump to the next one. So yes, you worked on a lot of cinematics throughout the game, from your early days and to the newest cinematics and patch 10.1. But is there a cinematic that you worked on that you are the most proud of? And if so, which one is it? And how has it helped you shape who you are as a storyteller?
This is always a challenging question because across, ever since Wrath of the Lich King, we're probably talking over 100 different moments. So sometimes I like to just jump around. The Wrathgate was clearly, defining in my career and in the department that ultimately ended up being created. And once we discovered that in-game cinematics are going to be a part of World of Warcraft going forward. I think that some of my personal favorites, Terran Zoo fighting Garrosh in the Siege of Orgrimmar trailer and in update 5.4. That was really when we were first pushing our animation. I had a lot of support from my animation partners at the time, and we just really wanted to reach for the sky and ended up doing this really, really cool scene between the two of them that kind of demonstrated, hey, we can do more
Mm.
than we were trying to before. I'd say the battle for Shatrath, the confrontation in Warlords of Draenor with Yrel and Duratan and Blackhand, that really felt structurally interesting because it was like three different viewpoints. It kind of started with Khadgar, and then we saw Yrel, and then it introduced Duratan's plight, and then it kind of went back and it accelerated through this ABC until everything came to a thrilling conclusion, which kind of pushed that structural notion in my mind and refined that. And then there's everyone always talks about Val'sharah and Ysera's passing, and just
Yeah.
how that was an emotional gut punch. It was visually compelling, but also it was a cinematic that was entirely done without any voiceover.
Mm.
Right, the idea that if a moment is earned, if a moment is powerful, sometimes the most powerful moments are without spoken language, and all of these things together. Right. As far as some of the ones I'm most proud of, I think Jaina in the Realm of Torment, was a very, very personal one for me. When we talk about writing our cinematics, it's always very collaborative. We work together with the narrative designers, but sometimes, I do occasionally write the treatments or the screenplays. And on that one, it was very personal, you know, being able to return excitement and recreate all those moments from Warcraft 3, but with intent and purpose. And why? Because Jaina was trying to parse a lot of her regrets, a lot of her trauma, a lot of the way that just so many things have gone terrible for her, you know, and how readily we as people start to blame ourselves for a lot of stuff that may have been completely out of our control. And trying to, you know, have a support network that can get us past that, past our own catastrophization, past our own mental spiraling, leading to reconciliation. And so, yeah, when we can get into the deep themes, that's
a really
powerful,
good
powerful
answer.
stuff.
That's a really good answer. Before I move on to some of the other topics, just want to know if you have any funny stories that happened while making one of the cinematics in Dragonflight that you could share.
You know, thinking of this question, we were just working on the most recent Opening the Way cinematic. And sometimes when we begin the movies, start assembling them in 3D, not all of the assets are ready. And so sometimes we use older assets that are from previous cinematics that are ready to be used, and we can use them kind of as a placeholder stand-in until the real asset is ready. And so we ended up seeing a cut of the movie at the beginning where it wasn't a centaur, it was a Vorkai, Lord Hearn from Ardenweald, and walking into the scene. And some people are like, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on here? Or they thought, oh my gosh, he's adorable, or he looks awesome. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, that's just a placeholder. But it could really throw people off because it immediately runs to all the, oh my gosh, are they here? Like, no. It's just an assistive mechanism.
That's a good one. So the in-game cutscenes have gotten way better over the last few expansions. I remember the first time I saw the cutscene between Pelagos and Clea. I think it was in patch 9.2.
Yep.
I remember how blown away I was. You could actually feel the emotions. You could see the facial expressions, and it was really cool to see. Of course, we had amazing acting as well. But I think that was one of the first times we've seen CGI models that good. So my question is, what makes the team choose an in-game cutscene like the Pelagos and Clea one, a cinematic that uses the in-game assets like the one we saw for patch 10.1, and a photorealistic CGI cinematic like the Old Soldier and Battle for Azeroth?
Well, it's so exciting to have all these different styles and tools that can assist in painting the picture of World of Warcraft's narrative for our audience. You know, typically the CGI cinematics, we refer to them as the tip of the spear. They're meant to really get out and open the consciousness of the wider world to what's going on in Warcraft, while the in-game cinematics, you know, tend to play within the content or closer to the previously on World of Warcraft. It feels like it lives exactly in this space that the players are playing in. And we also have the motion story animated, you know, artwork that we have done for most recently Legacies, and before that Afterlives, Harbingers, Warbringers. And those are also wonderful because they can show a lot of spaces in a beautifully rendered, very WoW-like painterly style, while also filling in some of the story background. Each one has their usefulness and their place, and they are varying levels of complexity. Myself as a creator, while I did have the opportunity to work on and direct the Bastion Afterlives, and it was a wonderful learning experience, and that was, you know, a great story to work on. I prefer working in the in-game cinematic pipeline because I like working on a lot of content. I like being able to touch the story in many places, while the high-end CGI, they take a lot of time. You know, they're very complex, and so and they do it wonderfully, and they bring such wonderful immersion and realism to this world. But I find myself more drawn to the place where we can spend a lot more different tales woven throughout the game. And that's really where the in-game cinematics, the cutscenes, using them in the appropriate locations to build out as much narrative support as we can for the game.
Okay. This one is one I'm actually curious about. I'm not sure if it gets too technical. You can just say if it does. But the cinematics that you guys create for the end game, are those models from the game, or are they created just for the cinematics? Because it looks like they are from within the game, just higher resolution and stuff like that.
You know, there's a distinction these days that there's like 3 different types of in-game cutscenes. As you mentioned, the Pelagos and Clea. During Shadowlands, we started experimenting with this animated real time, where it was no longer having to be put into a FMV video wrapper, but instead is able to play within the engine. And the first one we saw was Anduin holding the line, in the maw, and it was like, oh my gosh, what's going on there? And so those are one type. Then there's our classic, cutscenes, which we do to support gameplay. And then we have what we've called IGCs, or just the in-game cinematics, which are those FMVs, like Opening the Way or Secrets of the Reach recently. And generally, we always start with the in-game model. And depending on which we're doing, our artists on the cinematic side will do a appropriate up-res tactical adjustment, some very technical, like making sure that the underlying geometry deforms correctly when on a cinematic animation rig. But largely, yes, it all starts with the in-game model, and then it's brought to the level of fidelity or complexity, really, that is needed to support the cameras that we put on the characters. Whereas a lot of the design in WoW is understandably built from a game camera. So once we start putting the camera really, really, really close to things, that's where we'll do everything we needed to try to bring it up to what it should be to hold up.
Perfect. We talked a bit about technology. Is there a new technology in Dragonflight that you're really excited about using that you didn't have in Shadowlands? For example, the way the transitioning from the overworld down to the Zarala caverns, or something else you're really excited about using for storytelling in the future?
It's gonna sound so silly because it's something that most people just don't think of. But in some of the real-time animated scenes in Dragonflight, we gained the ability to blur the background. And I don't know how many people even notice that, because it's commonplace. You think cinematics, when it's out of focus close-up, but we had not had that technology until Dragonflight came out. And so when Rathian and Alexstrasza were talking, and she's, Rathian, what are you doing? And the background's just slightly out of focus. That's so simple and yet so massive, because it's technically called depth of field in cinematography. And what it does is it allows you to really allow the focus to fall on the character, to not be distracted as much by the detail in the environment, to know where we're supposed to look, to kind of give you that filmic vibe. And so while it's simple and minor and almost subliminal, I think it makes a significant difference in the power of these scenes to feel more cinematically presented.
Yeah, it's really cool. I actually didn't notice that, but now I definitely will notice it. So now that the technology has improved as much as it has throughout the years, is there any cutscene or maybe a cinematic that you would go back to and redo?
I think it's natural for an artist to look back on, early years, or even a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and be like, oh man, that's maybe not the choices that I would have made today. But, they're all a reflection generally of the time, the capability, the tools, the bandwidth, the thinking in the moment that they were needed. And for especially cinematics being a complex art form that involves a lot of effort, a lot of work. I myself, as mentioned earlier, I think it's generally better spent making more new content, spending our time making sure that when given the opportunity to look backwards and remaster the old, or to spend the same amount of effort on making even better new, I think creating more content for the player base is where my heart rests.
Sure. So believe it or not, I actually tried to count how many cinematics and cutscenes we have in the game, and I kind of gave up halfway through because
it's a lot.
Yeah, we have so many. So my question is, will we ever have an option to replay the cinematics and cutscenes directly from the game instead of going on YouTube and trying to find it in a good quality and so on and so forth?
It's been a evolving discussion and the ever evolving challenge. I think we've tried several things over the years, all the way back to the garrison. You know, you would have an NPC in your garrison that could play the cinematics from Warlords of Draenor, and later we had a memory cube that could play certain ones from that expansion. The challenge is, you know, finding the right solution to be able to play, as you mentioned, over 100 different moments. It's something we're discussing internally, and it's something we're thinking of solutions for. Don't have anything to share right now, but it's definitely on our mind.
Thank you. So my next few questions are about storytelling. I've always been a big fan of storytelling that makes the world feel a bit more alive, especially, you know, the small things. In patch 10.05, we got the trading post that a lot of people loved, but it also brought a lot of cool small interactions, like Flynn adopting a pet for Shaw, you know, Menric buying his new lava bracelet, or even Maximilian asking for a sword before finding out he already has one. Does the storytelling team purposely put time towards finding places to do something like that, or is it something that happens naturally as features are developed?
You know, World of Warcraft is a large collaborative effort with so many talented individuals that are all, you know, talented content creators, storytellers, artists, all working on a world that we collectively love so much. Amongst those are, you know, the quest designers, content designers, narrative designers, the artists, everyone, and they all have, you know, brilliant notions. Oh my gosh, wouldn't it be cool if Shaw had this thing, for instance? And resultingly, even when building not just the trading post, but say a new zone, there's all levels. There's the main overarching storyline with the big power player characters and the plot. And then there's the middle where, you know, what traverses us through this zone and why are we doing it? And then down on the bottom floor is what we call local stories, which is really this initiative driven by the quest designers to find the spaces and make the world feel lived in. And it absolutely is something they put a lot of thought toward. It is our utmost goal to make the world feel real, to make the world feel authentic and lived in and alive. And so all those crews, when it comes to, you know, developing out the trading post, they would collaborate together and try to find those hooks and nooks and crannies in a way to make it really feel like this is more than just another vendor. So can't give them enough credit for just whenever you find that wonderful flavor text or that wonderful, you know, moment that's just like, oh, did you catch that? That's amazing. But that's what I think really makes World of Warcraft vibrant.
Yeah, a lot of talented people for sure. So Dragonflight initially had a lot of its story content locked behind the Renown system, but the team seems to be moving a bit away from that. Do you feel like gating story behind Renown was a good idea, so stuff happens gradually instead of all at once? Or what are some of your thoughts about that?
There were definitely some reflections and lessons to be learned when we were initially putting together how the content would roll out with Renown. It can be difficult to gauge exactly how that's going to play out once you have the millions of players strike and all playing it in different ways. It can definitely teach you a lot more than what your initial thoughts about that were. But I think looking back on it, there are times when it is valuable to have some air or oxygen between, like, okay, this happens and then this happens, but the right mechanism to do that, I think we've reflected on, like, maybe, you know, there was too many levels of Renown required to unlock the green dragonflight, for instance, and there were other factors involved in that. But as with everything, we try something with one aspiration in mind. If it doesn't work, we look at the feedback, we look at the reaction, and as you see in Embers of Neltharion, there's been little shifting in the thinking of how we dole that content out, and we will continue to shift it as we go forward based on both feedback and the aspiration to create compelling moments.
Amazing. So one of the things that I'm a huge fan in Dragonflight is actually patch 10.07, because we have the amazing prologue that you guys made. I believe it's the first time we've seen something like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Does the team think the prologue was a success, and is it something we may see again leading into patch 10.2?
So the prologue was, 10.0.7 was the beginning of this new update cadence for World of Warcraft. When we released our roadmap, our plan late last year, it was quite exhilarating because while in Shadowlands we had, 2 major updates going into this content, you can see, oh man, there's one every season. As storytellers, when we first saw that this is our ambition, we lit up because there is so much potential here to not think of, not all patches are the same size or same volume of content. Clearly there's a season patch, and then there's the, like you said, this is a prologue patch. But that was intentional and by design. I saw this as the opportunity to utilize these moments as prologues or even epilogues, as we saw in 9.2.5. This thinking has been in motion for a while now. The opportunity to have updates that kind of have more oxygen to spend on these moments, like the aftermath with the undead with Kalia, and then in this, taking the moment to really put the spotlight on Abyssian and Emberthal. What are they up to? What are they thinking? And talking with Maria Hamilton, she referred to that specifically as that's the beginning of 10.1 in many ways, right? The story starts there with the two of them coming together, and then Sarkareth's moments there. So having the story play out more episodically is not only, I think, more exhilarating because we as a community can see that story play out progressively together and discuss it as it's unfolding, but from a storyteller perspective, it really allows us to carve the space to give these moments the time to shine and resonate with the player, and really put a pin on, like, hey, we want you to watch the incarnates here. We want you to learn who they are, what they're up to, what their attitudes are like. And some of that might be lost in the noise if it was just a giant update and everything's coming out at the same time. So it's been very, very exciting. And we're really, really pleased with how it's been playing out so far, and I'm looking forward to updates to come this year.
I think the player base really enjoyed it as well. I know some data miners might laugh a bit, but we've actually seen less and less story spoilers on the PTR. Is the team satisfied with how the balance between the content players can test out on the PTR is, and the surprise factor once it releases on retail?
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge because both goals are very valid, right? The desire to have secrecy around the story to ensure that it's unspoiled and delights and excites and surprises players, while wanting to make sure our public test realm is utilized to make our content as solid and refined and get as much feedback as we can. I think we've done pretty well on Dragonflight, balancing that. Some people ask, like, well, why do you hide this and why do you show this? Really, the content that has to mechanically play out, like sequential chapters, that's really, really important that we see that all of those things are working. Whereas the arrival, what happens at the end, that's the most substantial spoilers. That's the most stuff that, like, we want to leave that question mark. And those are the things that we've endeavored to hide. And for the most part, it's been successful. There's been, of course, always a couple things that slip through, but I think we're happy with how it's been playing out, and we'll be looking always to how we'll be doing it in the future and refining that methodology.
Amazing. I have a few questions that I saw on Twitter, and one question I saw come up multiple times is, will we ever see Razageth's visage form, and why haven't we seen it yet?
So Razageth, was the most tempestuous of the group, right? Just absolutely zealous for the cause of the primalists. And when we first saw her come out, the Titans, I don't want anything to do with them. And I think of the 4, when Iridikron looked back, slow your roll, Farok. Our sister's overconfidence was her downfall. Part of that can be measured with, she was too brash, she was too out in the open. And that can include the fact that, hey man, if you could have been more tactical, you could have been more subtle, but Razageth was not a subtle character. And so she didn't spend a lot of time trying to not be a dragon. She was unabashedly like, this is who I am, this is what I represent, this is what I'm fighting for. Whereas the other dragons at Iridikron's behest are like, we have to be smart about this. We have to be tactical. We have to take advantage of everything we have, if that includes shifting into forms that allow us to walk unnoticed while we rebuild our strength. So I think it's almost a matter of character as much as it is a matter of when will we see it? Well, can't say anything about the future, but who knows?
And yeah, I think that's all the time we had today. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was a real pleasure talking to you, and I hope we can do it sometime again in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like we could talk for hours on that.
For hours, definitely. There's so many questions that I have, but yeah, sadly our time is over.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
This is absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And yeah, have a good rest of your day.
Yep, you too.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.